Learn how to use your laser machine to make this open-air Mini-ITX PC acrylic case. We'll show you how.
We wanted to try something different with this case. I think like most people, I like to see the computer that I've put together on display, all lit up and fan spinning. I still remember the day when I was cutting holes in my cases with the Dremel to add acrylic windows. The idea of a case with a window still didn't exist yet. Yeah, that's how old I am. I like small computers, so this was designed for a Mini-ITX and SFX power supply unit. This was a lot simpler than the last case I designed since it's so open. The only tricky part was figuring out the graphics card slot. It was mostly just laid out in CorelDRAW and then pulled into Fusion 360 to make sure things fit as expected before I wasted any material in the laser. For this project, I'm using clear 1/8" extruded acrylic. I'd rather have used cast acrylic, but this is what we had extra laying around. If you don't know, laser cut extruded acrylic smells pretty bad compared to cast acrylic. The blue color that you see on the acrylic is a plastic liner. It's on both sides of the sheet. It can be left on when cutting to protect the surface from burning and scratches, and then just peeled off later. I'd rather a paper mask liner, but again, that's what we had available. The pieces for this case are pretty small, with the largest piece being about 7 inches by 12 inches, so this is a good project for someone with a small hobby laser at home. On a side note, if you're looking for acrylic for laser cutting, in my experience you have 3 types of sources. You can get sheets of acrylic at your local hardware store, but this is probably your most expensive option, but still good if you're just doing a one-off project. You might also have small local custom plastic fabrication shops that will sell sheets and drop or scrap pieces really cheap. That's a good way to get a nice variety of materials, thicknesses, and colors for cheap. If you're looking to do some serious production though, and need a lot more material, you can see if you have a true plastic supplier in the area. This is the more industrial type that supplies contractors and stocks pallets of 4x8 foot sheets. If you can't find anyone local, you can find some online, but then you're usually paying extra for shipping. Also, you can sometimes have your sheets cut down for you to fit your laser bed for free or a minimal charge. To assemble the pieces, the case pieces were taped together and then glued. The glue used for acrylic is a special water-thin kind that basically just melts the acrylic, causing it to bond to itself. I'm showing the process of how the glue is applied, but I'm not really gluing it. I was just too impatient and had already glued this case off camera. Sorry. I had already tapped the holes for the motherboard standoffs earlier, so it's just a matter of screwing them in. All the parts used in this build will be listed at the bottom in the description. Alternatively, I could have just made the holes a little bigger and used nuts to secure the standoffs. The case was sized to use an SFX power supply. It was easier to plug in the power cables before it was inserted in the case, which is what I'm doing here. The acrylic is thicker than what you'd find on a metal case, but the standard power supply screws are still long enough to secure it. The power button I'm putting in here is a pretty common type that you can find on a lot of listings on Amazon. Again, we'll have a link in the description to the one that I used below. I used an M.2 drive for the operating system, which you'll see in a bit, but I wanted to add extra storage, so I made a few mounting options on the back of the case for a regular size SSD drive. I added these smaller standoffs directly to the drive and then secured it to the case with screws. I don't think a case like this really needs extra cooling, but I figured it doesn't hurt to move a little air across it, so I created this adjustable 120mm fan bracket. It can slide up and down and move toward and away from the case for adjustment. The only caveat is that a large graphics card might get in the way of it. The motherboard supports addressable RGB, so that's the type of fan this is. If I didn't already say it, the case was designed for a Mini-ITX form factor motherboard. I'm dropping in an AMD CPU that supports onboard graphics, but I'll still be using a separate graphics card for this build. The M.2 drive I'm using is from XPG. I liked it because right now I think it's one of the only M.2 drives that have LEDs on it. Anyway, I covered their logo with some vinyl because I thought it looked cleaner. I don't think this caused any heat issues, at least I haven't seen any issues yet. I wanted to use a larger aftermarket CPU cooler with an LED fan, more for looks than because of performance. So the bracket you see here goes underneath the motherboard. You might notice some scratches on the right side of the bracket. I had to do a little creative bending to make sure it had the correct clearance on the backside. I guess that's one of the challenges when you're using ITX motherboards. I'd already removed the factory CPU cooler brackets here, so I just had to drop the motherboard onto the bracket. Once you know the correct configuration for your processor, putting these mounting brackets together is pretty easy. There's a lot of ways to apply thermal paste. I've never been comfortable just putting a pea-sized drop in the center or even using an X pattern, since you just can't see how well it will spread under the cooler. I've always spread it out myself using a piece of a business card, but the cooler came with this spatula. Honestly, you'll see I did a terrible job spreading this out compared to my business card method, but I think it's good enough. The cooler now just goes on with 2 screws. I alternated tightening each one down a little at a time until they stopped. No need to over tighten them. The fan attaches to the cooling fins with some spring clips. You just need to make sure you get the fan orientation right. You want it pushing air through the fins. I would have liked the fan on the other side, but it would have been in the way of the memory sticks. Again, the limitations on using such a small motherboard. So I just needed to wrestle the motherboard onto the standoffs. And then I just need to secure the motherboard with 4 screws. My hands are in the way, but I'm plugging in the front panel connectors, which is just the power button and power LED jumpers. If you're wondering what type of memory I'm using, because you don't recognize it, they're XPG brand. I had sanded off the logo and then wrapped it in a matte black vinyl to change the look of the LEDs. Will it cause any heat issues? I have no idea, but I haven't had any problems yet. Almost done. Just plugging in the 2 motherboard power connectors. At some point now, the fans were plugged into the motherboard. I seem to have missed that. And I'm now connecting the SSD drive, SATA, and power connectors. The graphics card is secured with some thumb screws and nuts that just sandwich the card's bracket between some acrylic pieces. And finally, just a little tidying up of the loose wiring, and that's it.
Thanks for watching. Let us know in the comments what you think, and if you've ever thought about doing an open air case like this. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and click the bell to get notified of future projects. We have more computer-related projects coming soon.